Good day again to our instructional leaders of Murrieta Valley Unified. Welcome back to the Tesseract Project, our long-term plan for professional development of leaders and teachers. This is our next installment for the PLCs of Intra-Unit meeting protocols. This will be about what's going on in the middle of a unit that teachers are walking the journey of that unit together. Remember that the purpose of this project is to radically improve the education system of our schools, and it's being done by a focused, customized professional development just for you, our leadership, yours, mine. And so what we're looking at here with the principles, our three axioms, is that the teachers don't improve until the kids improve. So we see this teacher trying to lift up the student, raise the level of learning for that student. We know the student's not going to get there on their own. But then we're standing over there on the right as the team of leaders, administrators, and we talked last time about how we are outnumbered and we have way too many things going on. We're trying to flip way too many switches. So rather than running around and flipping those switches, can we apply some leverage? And the leverage is that we're going to apply. Notice you standing there, and you're going to move some fantastic things, and you're going to do it through the PLCs. And that's what we're looking at here. We talked about the symbolism. We're going to continue with the symbolism of structure as you see in that Tesseract diagram. Again, we're talking about building scaffolds. I'm going to continue with these images. Scaffolds so the teachers can climb up. Those are our systems. But we also have protocols on how they relate to each other. That's what the molecules represent. That in nature, in things that we build, in mathematical models, we have this structure. And remember what Rick DeFord taught us, and that is that we can change beliefs by changing behavior. So our objective today, really straightforward. We're starting to get the hang of it now. We're going down the list. We talked last time about pre-unit. Next time we'll talk post-unit. Right now we're going to be discussing what should be happening in the middle of a unit. And we're going to talk about the different components there. I'm going to give you some ideas. We can't implement all of those initiatives all at the same time. So we have to lay it out over the course of several years. And then the piece that we're looking at here on the Tesseract project, you'll see in the Intra-Unit, there's just a handful of things, but we're going to break it up into two parts because one of those pieces is intervention. It needs its own attention. So on the PLC definition, remember, it comes down to two sentences. We're going to be working on the second half of the first sentence, the action research to achieve better results for students. So last time we talked about teachers looking at what's ahead of them in the unit and what they plan on doing collaboratively with the unit. And then now we're talking about what kind of action are they going to take. So if you look further down the list there, you'll see we're going to be working on the how. Last time we talked about the why. Then now we're going to be looking at teachers looking at the how. Notice what we're doing. Teachers are going to take adult action. So this idea of collective teacher efficacy, it's going to increase student learning. That's the objective. And then they're going to reflect on just how much their actions did increase that student learning. And so here we go. We're going to break this up into two parts. The first part is the intra-unit task. So at the beginning, when the teachers have looked at the standards, decided their pedagogical moves, what kind of tasks they're going to do, those things we talked about last time, right? In the common assessment up front, dual targets, what are they going to focus on? Now, what's going to happen during the unit? It basically comes down to two pieces, what's happening in the classroom and then what's happening with intervention. So what's going on in the classroom? You're going to see this pattern here. It says 1 task, 2 task, 3 task implementation. So the advice that I give, and actually I got this from a colleague of mine, when we were math coaches together, and it carried a lot of weight. And I'm going to tell you, we gave this advice. I just gave this advice to one of our high schools in the district, and that math team seems to be jumping on it. And that is that we're looking for 1 task per unit for the first year, whatever that first year may be, whether it's next year or the year after in your plan. Have your teachers go through and just ask, what is 1 common task per unit that you can choose to do together? One of the things I've quoted is that the research says it should be about 60%. 40% should still be direct instruction, notes, procedural practice for things in math and, things like whatever that may be, balancing equations in chemistry or grammar and conventions in English. But we have that's that 40%. But the other 60% should be tasks, higher order thinking, group activity, classroom discourse. We're not going to get to 60% overnight. So can we ask teachers to do one task each unit? And if you have 3 or 4 units in a year, then you've got 3 or 4 new tasks that year. Then the next year, ask them to implement another new task for each of those units. Now you have 6 to 8 units. It's not going to take but a few years before you have several dozen units and going in for the year. So let's just look at planning on that. So where are those going to draw? Are you going to start year 1 and do it year 1, 2, and 3? Are you going to do it years 2, 4, and 6? But kind of bring that in. And when are you going to start moving your teachers forward on the task implementation? There's also this idea of cumulative homework and quizzes. English, not so much of an issue. For content subjects, huge issue. So we tend to package things in units. And then if the unit is too big, teachers will break it down into little subunits with a quiz. I'm going to teach for 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to give an assessment. We're going to package that up, put it in the grade book, toss it aside. We're not going to look at it again until the final exam or just before the state test. Long-term retention requires kids to revisit things at least 9 times. And so we need to be putting in place cumulative homework, cumulative quizzes, cumulative assessments. So where kids are constantly having to recall and hopefully not just recall and regurgitate, but recall and apply content knowledge. And then discourse. In mathematics, it's the 5 practices, but now the 5 practices have come out in science as well. And so how do we build? In English, we already have things like Socratic seminar, but where do we have discourse where kids are talking about ideas? So these are the things. The discourse, by the way, is there to lead group work. Teachers really don't understand. They're very afraid, petrified of group work and classroom discourse because their little experience with it has been that it degenerates into chaos. So we need to give them training in order to conduct that well. And they cannot conduct tasks well, and they cannot teach higher order thinking skills well without that discourse. So where's that going to come in? And what else might you want to add to the list? Maybe you want to ditch something from the list. Maybe you want to modify something from the list. Be thinking about that. And then the other piece here is the intra-unit intervention. Do we have intervention structures? A lot of you are starting to look at where can we fit in things like office hours, tutorial, pride period. It's a half-hour slot. Some of us have 2 days a week. Some of us want 2 days a week. Some of us want to go 4 days a week. That's a UA is also a term that's being used in our district, universal access. When are we going to introduce that into our system so that when kids need intervention on, and you'll see there later on the list, the prerequisite skills that it takes to be successful, and we need to step to tier 2 because the kid has been identified as needing some extra intervention. When do we want to introduce that infrastructure? When are we going to train teachers and get them looking at question number 3, which is what are we going to do when kids don't know something? And then when do we want to introduce question 4? When do we want to start talking about what are we going to do when they do know what we've taught them? So basically, when are we going to introduce intervention and when are we going to introduce enrichment? So those are there. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 1 intervention is I'm a teacher. I've identified that these are the prerequisite skills kids are needing. I've identified that my kids know this, but they don't know those things. And so I handle it in class. In-house, it's me. Tier 2 intervention is we, as a PLC, have given this pretest on the prerequisite skills, and we've recognized a large number of kids need some help. And so we're going to take it to that half-hour, office hour tutorial intervention period. And then the other thing we're looking at, particularly for math, is a digital component, digital acceleration. So things like either Imagine Math, Dreambox, there are digital components out there that will drill down and beef kids up on their prerequisite skills. Analog, I'm naming that means basically non-digital. And so if you have a digital clock, an analog clock is the one with the little hands circling on it. So analog is basically means pick up a book and read. So, or do something with pencil and paper. So I'm hearing from the English teachers is we can use a tool to measure kids, a digital tool to measure kids, say a Lexile score, like with our reading intervention diagnosis, but some universal screener gives us a Lexile score, and then we realize the kids are below level. What can we do to get those kids up to level? And the thing that keeps coming back to me is they just need to read. But those kids, a lot of the kids that need it won't read on their own. So then we need to build something into the system so we can get them to read more, which will build them up. And then we do have to kind of look at what's going to be science and eventually on the horizon social studies, what will be their version of this. And then what else? What else on the list that you think, from your experience, needs to be put in the intervention system? Or do you want to shorten the list? You want to modify the list? It's going to be your plan. So you're going to be going to student.desmos with a new code there. It's going to ask you to start, and this one's going to do it twice. It's going to ask you, what is the ultimate goal of your intra-unit? If you just saw, hey, look, come look at my PLC. Guys, my teams, look what they're doing in the middle of the unit. And we were to go and look, what would that look like? What would be your ultimate goal? And then lay out those components. And then the next slide will ask you, hey, what's your ultimate goal for intervention? If your intervention was just knocking it out of the park, hitting on all cylinders, what would it look like? And then lay out those components over the 6 years, because you're not going to do all the things on that list. You're not going to implement them all next year. So it's got to lay out over this 6-year plan. So have fun with it. But that's it for this one. Take your activity. Your task is go into Haiku, do the card sort. Make sure you list both parts within that line, the intra-unit as well as the intervention. It all goes on the same line of the plan. And then give me your comments and questions on the discussion prompt so we can continue to move forward in changing this world, this time one teacher at a time.